It is Monday, the 10th of December. Good evening. My name is Michelle Ngele Hodhiambo. On the big story tonight, the world marks the 70th anniversary of the UN Declaration on Human Rights, a feat that shines a spotlight on the abuses and injustices meted on humanity. In the Kenyan coast, allegations of forced disappearances have become commonplace, with the youth being the most affected. Relatives of the victims are pointing an accusing finger on the police, since many of the missing youth disappeared moments after they were arrested by police. But the coast is also a prime recruiting ground for Al-Shabaab militia, who lure the youth to join jihadists in Somalia, further complicating the cases of missing youths at the coast. And just last Friday, police were again put on the spot after a Nairobi court temporarily barred the IG Joseph Boynet and the Department of Criminal Investigations from publishing on social media photos of suspects who are yet to be charged over various criminal investigations. The petitioner argues that posting of the suspects' photos ignores the presumption of innocence rule, but police say the pictures are taken when a decision to arraign the suspects is reached.
Attitude in policing is that the public must come first. This attribute, coupled with integrity, is indeed key to maintaining a lasting basis for security and safety in any society.
On the program tonight, I shall be speaking to lawyers Manuel Jose as well as Enoch Waboba, who is also a blogger. But before I engage them, let's cross over to the city centre, where lead reporter tonight, Abubakar Abdullahi, is on standby with more. Abubakar, good evening.
Good evening, Michelle. It is 70 years since a cold world met in an icy, of course, France. The world leaders coming together to shape up what was now becoming a document of interest in as far as the human right is concerned, saying no and never to what happened in the World War the World War II by then. Of course, this document became later a preamble of human right, and in as far as human right is concerned, stating of human rights and how individual countries were supposed to treat people in as far as respect for life, respect and freedom is concerned. So what we saw on Friday is that the DCI and the Inspector General of Police, that is Joseph Boynet, were ordered not to temporarily publish documents which had the pictures of individuals. These documents contained parading suspects with their pictures, dates of birth, and interestingly, their phone numbers. Their phone numbers eliciting reaction that these could be as well used by anyone and anyone to trace them and get to them in as far as their personal safety and security is concerned. Remember the time the world was meeting in Paris to craft what is now the world's most famous document, the first declaration in as far as the UN General Assembly's declarations are concerned. Kenya as well was by then fighting for its own independence. In 1948, the then Independence Party, KANU, was equally calling for the rights of Kenyans to be respected, calling for an end to a white settler regime that was as well in this country by then. So in as far as the document is concerned, a document that is widely respected, but to trickle down to people and their effects in as far as this document is concerned has remained a challenge. Many as well, 70 years after this document was published, after the world agreeing and putting its head together, many as well, and many countries are accused, many authorities are accused of violating this precious document in as far as respect for life and respect for human beings is concerned. The latest indices show, as per Muhuri, of course, Muslims for Human Rights, giving their own assessments in as far as the coastal area is concerned, say that at least 71 people are missing either or are dead in as far as the coastal region is concerned. Of course, again, highlighting the situation of extrajudicial killing in as far as the country is concerned. They say 34 people are suspected to have been killed by police. 41 as well out of that 70 plus are missing. This, of course, evidently backed by the number of families that have come out to talk about the disappearances of their kids and their loved ones. So the human rights situation remains a quagmire regionally, and so has an improvement as well been noted in as far as respect for life, respect for freedom is concerned. Regionally, Kenya is touted to be spearheading the respect for human rights in a region that as well has Somalia in it, which has struggled as well with human rights. Of course, terrorism headlining the situation there, 25 years plus the ruins. It's a country, they say, the document now says, and research as of now shows that has improved. South Sudan as well, and its violation of human rights. And regionally, this gives Kenya some sort of a mileage. But even back at home, back here, questions rise over how many people disappear annually due to extrajudicial killings, due to disappearances that intelligence doesn't seemingly show, due to disappearances that loved ones say they saw their loved ones, the families rather say they saw their loved ones with the hands of those in authority. So this, again, putting some sort of a dent in as far as what the world leaders met to discuss 70 years ago in a cold Paris, just after the aftermath of a world war, putting again to the headlines whether the document that was crafted, a document that will later give way for the publication, of course, of various constitutions in as far as human rights is concerned, informing major decisions, major constitutional amendments in different countries across the world. A document that later on, of course, inspired the formation of the International Criminal Court, a global criminal court, a form of justice that was supposed to make sure that those who committed crimes against humanity could be held to account. So even as the documents, even as the progressive report that the world backs on and looks up after 70 plus years of implementation of this particular document is concerned, the human rights situation is not as impressive as the founding fathers and the writers probably of this document will have loved it to be. So in Kenya, and as far as the human rights situation is concerned, of course, allegations, and these can only be proven, of course, and if evidence is adduced in a court of law, police again headlining much of the not so good news in as far as the disappearances of people is concerned. Michelle.
There, Abu Bakar, live from our city centre studios. In studio with us is two lawyers, Mano Hosea as well as Eno Kwaboba, joining us live from our city centre studios. Mano, many thanks for joining us on the big story tonight. 70 years since the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and truth be told, there are things to celebrate. Let's begin with the good. Why do you celebrate 70 years on?
Having me tonight. It's a very big day for human rights activists, human rights enthusiasts all over the world, because it's a day to celebrate the gains of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was enacted 70 years ago. I believe there is much to celebrate than to reprimand, considering the strides we have taken as a country, and even the strides the entire world has taken towards ensuring that we actually have our laws, in tandem with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Right.
Presently, we have close to 198 countries that have ratified that United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I believe that is a great stride because most of these countries have actually dedicated these rights to their constitutions. Remember, as a country, we dedicated an entire chapter of Chapter 4 of the Constitution towards the Bill of Rights, and I believe we have tremendously followed that trajectory of ensuring that we fulfill the requirement and we respect the human rights as enshrined under that statute. I believe also we have made numerous strides in ensuring that we give space for institutions and organizations that have come up in ensuring that they put governments into check in ensuring that human rights are respected in all the countries. I believe we have progressed much, and there's a long way to go, but I believe there is much progress as a country we've made, and even as the United Nations.
The state of the nation and the people in relationship to the rights vested in this declaration. And I mean, the declaration contains the right to freedom from torture, the right to education, the right to a decent living. Where as a country have we reached, and where do we fall short, where we need to improve on?
I believe there are great challenges, especially as a country we are facing. For instance, the issue of extrajudicial killing. It has been an issue of concern and a human rights issue for the last 20 or so years.
Right.
We have seen police brutality, forced disappearances by police, and I believe that is a challenge that the sphere of human rights is experiencing at the moment. And I believe as a country we have tried as much as we can to ensure that these issues are addressed, and there is that political will and government support to ensure that these extrajudicial killings do not occur. The second issue, I believe, is violence against women. It has been a concern as a country that is one of the greatest violations that we have had at the moment, where women are their rights are violated and violently. I believe that is also a concern that, or rather challenge that, the human rights area is experiencing at the moment.
Right.
These are the most spoken of issues, and I believe even as we go forth, we really need to put a lot of pressure into government institutions, the police. We have seen forced disappearances, especially on during the political period. People are murdered, brutalized, and I believe that is an area that we need to put more focus, and those are the challenges that the human rights sector is experiencing at the moment.
All right. Let's bring in Enoch Waboba joining us live from our city center studios. Enoch, good evening. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights continues to form the basis for international human rights law today. In fact, it remains the most translated human rights document in the world. In your view, how has the implementation been in the country?
Thank you so much for having me today. I didn't get the last bit of your question. However, as Manuel has indicated, there is still a lot that needs to be done in terms of attaining human rights as we know them. But great strides have been made, and as a result of the enactment and adoption of the UDHR, several countries have modeled their human rights instruments or laws along the provisions of the UDHR, and I think that has helped a great deal in ensuring that even at municipal or national level, countries are able to, have the discourse on human rights based on benchmarks that are set at an international level.
Right.
But also, more importantly, when you look at the establishment, or rather the steps leading to the proclamation and adoption of the UDHR, you see this as a document that came up on the morning of the World War II.
Right.
And so if you were to look at the objectives that the UDHR was set to attain, you could say to a certain extent they have. The instrument has helped to, forestall a lot of human rights violations, and it is still work in progress, if I may.
How would you say the response or the support has been from the government and political leaders in terms of supporting human rights commissions and human rights defenders in the country? And you refer to previous cases, recent cases, like the stories of the late Willie Kimani, human rights defenders who ended up paying the ultimate cost in their work.
First of all, we must appreciate the context of the government's role in human rights protection. And I would think this is a fundamental issue for even government to appreciate that government's role as stipulated in our governing law, the Constitution, government's role is to observe, it is to respect, it is to protect and promote human rights.
Right.
So it must, all these things must be understood within that context. More often than not, government has been seen as, an entity that comes on its defense whenever human rights violations are committed. But government should be actually on the forefront when you look at provisions of the Constitution on implementation of the Bill of Rights.
Right.
Government should be on the forefront of ensuring there is protection, and in that I'm talking about protection from citizen to citizen. Government should ensure that. In terms of respect, I'm thinking of refrain in terms of violations.
Right.
Government itself as an entity, in its obligation to respect human rights, it has an obligation to refrain from committing or doing acts of omissions which lead to infringement of human rights.
Right.
In terms of the support, specific question, in terms of the support that government offers to civil society, you would expect government to do that, not always, because government most of the time is the one accused of these human rights violations. But in the recent past, I think we are seeing a collaboration between civil society, human rights NGOs, and all these players and stakeholders within the human rights movement. And they are meeting government, I think, just as late as today or the day before, yesterday. There are efforts for civil society to, partner with government and identify some of these issues that are pressing in the human rights movement.
All right, and I mean, Manuel, just borrowing from what Enoch had to say, has the government delivered in its obligation to champion the implementation of human rights, basic like the Bill of Rights, especially with allegations of forced disappearances in the coastal region, relatives of the victims pointing an accusing finger at the police because many of these forced disappearances happen when the victims are at the hands of the police?
I think, Michelle, government has been, as Wabuba stated, government has been the problem in most cases because most human rights violations are either perpetrated by the government or people who are in government. I believe in terms of legislation and law, the government has been supportive in ensuring that we have the right legislations, and even, ensuring that there was good political will when we put in the Bill of Rights into our constitution. I believe that was a great stride from the government supporting and ensuring that we actually ensure that we have these laws in our laws. But in terms of enforcement, and I believe that is where the biggest problem is, especially with the police. You mentioned the case of Willie Kimani. It's unfortunate that an advocate died and all his clients because of extrajudicial killings. I believe there is much that is needed to be done, considering that these cases are still there. And it's time we change the tact. I think the case is still before court, but I believe there are other tactics that need to be employed to ensure that we do not have people lose their lives because of police brutality or because of extrajudicial killing. I believe what is needed is goodwill. Because if government demonstrates that if these people who perpetrate or take away people's lives or make people disappear are brought to book, I believe that can actually send a message to the entire fraternity in the security sector to actually take caution, even as they enforce their mandate to actually ensure that they protect the human rights. So I believe there is much that needs to be done. There is a political will that is needed, in ensuring that there's a crackdown on rogue police officers or rogue government officials or leaders who take advantage of the system and violate human rights.
Right. And speaking of accountability, Enoch, perhaps you can speak to that because, like I said, an accusing finger has been pointed at police by relatives of victims of forced disappearances, especially at the coastal region. But the police service has come out very clearly that it's only a few rogue police officers. How have accounting authorities like the Independent Policing Oversight Authority performed in terms of holding accountable those accused of such violations?
I think it's good that you mentioned IPOA because I think that is much of their mandate. Because sometimes when the police officer is the one investigating, at the same time is the one stating that you did this offense, and is the one that the government relies upon to actually give information as to, you know, disappearance of a person. You go first to the police officers. When it happens that they're the people who are perpetuating or who are causing these forced disappearances, then it becomes an issue of the oversight. IPOA has a responsibility to actually get into the root of these issues. I think they have not done very well, especially on the disappearances in the coast region. This is because the institution, IPOA, has not been given or doesn't have the proper structures or capacity to actually go into the root of these matters and even bring out the perpetrators. But I believe with the new management, they are trying as much as they can to ensure that these people are brought to book and are actually prosecuted for the crimes that they committed themselves. I believe this used to be, or rather police, the security sector used to receive instructions, especially from political figures, and then perpetuate these, crimes against human beings, in the disguise of political figures. So I believe when we hold them accountable, even though they were used for political reasons, then they will see the need to actually not take part in an illegality, which ultimately will make them criminals as law enforcement. So I believe there is much that is needed to be done. IPOA needs to do its work. It needs to step up again, but they also need to, the government needs to give it capacity in terms of allocations so that it can have enough resources to ensure that they conduct their duties of ensuring that these rogue officers are brought into book.
All right, Emmanuel, even as you comment on the role of IPOA on this, a new development just last week there after Nairobi court temporarily barred the Inspector General of Police as well as the DCI from publishing on social media photos of suspects who are yet to be charged over various criminal allegations. And the petitioner then argues that posting these pictures ignores the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, which essentially is part of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Your thoughts on the same?
I believe mugshots have been there since time immemorial. I think the United States of America began the issue of mugshots, where suspected criminals are taken photos and they are documented for purposes of record. And I believe that was the purpose of taking photos and documenting them for purposes of what we may term in law as parading of the accused persons for purposes of identification. Also for purposes of ensuring that if this person actually commits a future offense, there is record of the previous offenses. I think the DCI and the police have taken it far by posting these photos on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. That boils down to infringement of the rights of these people, the right to privacy, the right to dignity. I'm looking at it from the perspective of a victim of rape, a person who has been accused of a sexual offense, for instance, rape or defilement. This person is a suspect as per the law, and there are rights of suspected persons stipulated in the Constitution. I don't think whether posting the photos of these people on Facebook, considering that they are still not guilty of any offense, they have not been convicted of any offense, they have not been taken even plea in court, is outrageous, and I believe it violates the right to human dignity. And then looking at it from this, what is the intention of the DCI? Is it to humiliate these people on social media? Because I believe there is no employer. The public opinion is more important when it comes to the personal reputation of individuals. If this person who was suspected of committing a sexual offense, his photo is put out there, and ultimately is acquitted of the offense, what perception has the DCI created about this person out there? So I think it will be very wrong to post this photo. It's good to take the photos. The mugshots are good for record purposes, and also to ensure that in future instances when these offenses occur, it's easy to go through the records for evidentiary value. But I don't think whether it's important to demean the reputation of a person even before a court convicts that person. So the only the aspect of maybe most probably if this person is a wanted person, then it's justified to post their photos on social media for purposes of the public, or if you're cautioning the public of the dangers of this person, then it's justified. But if somebody has been arrested on suspicion of committing a crime, then the due process ought to take place. And until a court of law declares this person to have committed this crime, then this person should not be persecuted on the public.
All right, and that has been quite the debate there. Many arguing it will depend on the nature of the crime, but then that is the point then of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Everybody is covered. We'll come back to this conversation as the world celebrates 70 years since the adoption of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. This is a big story.